All right, welcome back, everybody. It's been more than 9 months now since the Minimum Wage Act was made law. In light of this, the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, that's the CCMA, shop stewards and union officials will be gathering for a 2-day meeting that starts today to assess how the minimum wage has been implemented nationwide. So discussing this with us in studio, we've got Mpumelelo Nconco, who is the Acting Convening Senior Commissioner at the CCMA. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Morning, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, the CCMA, have you dealt with quite a few cases since the minimum wage has come in where there are cases where it hasn't actually been implemented to them?
Yes, we've dealt with quite a significant amount of cases. Obviously, based on the fact that the law is not retrospective, the cases are only starting to really grow at a progressive rate now currently. Because the Act was amended 1st of Jan, and therefore any cases that were arising prior to that we couldn't hear. So we're now moving quite at a progressive state. So we have seen an increase in the caseload, yes.
Yeah, and that is very, very worrying when you think about it, because there's also a lot of articles that sort of come through and reports coming through also saying that there have been a lot of people losing their jobs due to the minimum wage implementation because, you know, the companies can't actually afford it. And a lot of this comes from lower skilled workers. What does it look like from your side in terms of records?
From my experience, I tend to sort of disagree with the job losses. I haven't seen job losses as a consequence of the national minimum wage. I've seen job losses in your larger corporations where the employees there would be earning way above the national minimum wage. So I tend to disagree with that point. And obviously to balance things out, those employees who say that they are unable to afford the minimum wage, they are then given an option to apply for an exemption. And that exemption is determined by the Department of Employment and Labour. And if granted, it's usually for those earning above the threshold, and it's not more than 10%. But when granted, it does not exceed a period of 1 year. So every year, if you want to apply for an exemption, you are entitled to, but you would have to show good cause in as far as why you believe you should be exempted. So the job losses as a consequence, I don't really agree with that one.
That's quite interesting, because you see a lot of companies reporting results, and as they're reporting results, they will quote the minimum wage having a very big effect on their bottom line. And the one I'm looking at, I mean, I just picked out one company. It's called Workforce Holdings, and what they do is they do staffing and outsourcing, training, financial services and healthcare. And they have said the minimum wage legislation has hurt Workforce's staffing and outsourcing business, with the unit reporting a 15% decline in earnings. So I mean, just picking up one, that's the first one that jumps up. So I don't know if the reality versus what companies are saying.
Yeah, if I hear you correctly, you're talking about workplace staffing, which is your temporary employment services. There would be a decline in employment in as far as that is concerned, because there was a previous amendment to say that if you qualify for a temporary employment service and you've worked for a client for longer than 3 months, they then need to absorb you as a permanent employer. So obviously, when it comes to labor brokers and temporary employment services, they can maybe allege that there's a decline in as far as employment for them. But what is happening is that if those cases are referred to the CCMA and there are grounds and there are merits, those people are absorbed into permanent employees by the client. And then obviously that then differs, because it's when they're absorbed, it's not the national minimum wage that kicks in. It's they need to be absorbed on terms not less favorable than the employees who are currently working for the client. So there's truth, but the truth is not as a consequence of the national minimum wage. It is as a consequence of the amendment to Section 198, which affects employment services and clients, and protecting those vulnerable workers from being exploited for working for continuous temporary services, having fixed-term contracts for years and years, and not getting the safety and the job security of being employed permanently.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning where you were saying that the CCMA has seen a lot of different issues coming in and the related to the national minimum wage referrals. This conference that you're going to be having,
yes.
What are you hoping to achieve out of this? I mean, will this be obviously one of the big issues, the unions and the CCMA coming together to discuss this?
The aim of the conference is to say, we have this beautiful piece of legislation which now covers people who the vulnerable or your low-income workers who were not covered before. To make it effective, there's an amendment to the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which then gives the CCMA concurrent jurisdiction to issue issues pertaining to enforcement of people of employers who are not in compliance with the national minimum wage and or the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So what has happened is the conference is there to open up a social dialogue with all the relevant stakeholders, because now we have this concurrent jurisdiction to enforce such people who break the law. What is then currently happening is that we as a CCMA are of the view that we are doing a good job within the confines of what the legislation allows us to do, in that when these cases are referred to us in terms of Section 73A, you'll have a person who will come and they say, look, my employer is not paying me in terms of the national minimum wage. I'm here to open up a case. So being the proactive organization we are, what we do is we attempt to pre-conciliate that dispute. Pre-conciliation is we try and resolve it on the date it is referred to us. So we attempt, which is for us the best case scenario, because if parties are able to settle the case on the day, on terms that the parties agree upon in line with the law, then it means that we're not going to have issues when it comes to compliance of that settlement agreement. But you have, in an event where the parties are unable to resolve the dispute, then on that same date the case is referred, 14 days notice is given to the parties to come and appear before the CCMA. The process that it's set down for is CONARB, which is a conciliation and arbitration. It takes place it's a dual process. The conciliation is like a second bite at the cherry, where we try and see if the parties don't want to resolve the dispute. If the parties are unable to resolve the dispute at conciliation, we then move on to the next process on the same date, which is arbitration. And the arbitration basically is both parties then are given an opportunity to present evidence in as far as why they're saying there's non-compliance and what remedy that they seek. Then the commissioner then makes a determination in the form of an award, and that award is valid and binding and only subject to labour court scrutiny. So then what happens is then, if the respondent then fails to comply still, then we certify that arbitration award, and then a writ is generated, and then it can be attached. So with the amendments, the process is swifter in as far as once you've alleged and you're able to prove, you get the desired results much more swifter within a period of 30 days or 6 weeks or so.
Why have you not invited business? I mean, surely they should be a part of this discussion.
Business will be there.
So they will be there,
yeah,
they will be present.
Business will be there, and the nice thing about business is that there is a National Minimum Wage Commission. The National Minimum Wage Commission consists of organised labour, organised business, organised community. So they also give input in as far as what should happen, in as far as the recommendations that should be made for benchmarking the national minimum wage going forward, because it's reviewed. It's not going to stay at 20 Rand, 18 Rand an hour. It's going to be reviewed annually with the stakeholders I've just mentioned now, to ascertain whether or not what should be benchmarked to suit business.
And that review will happen at the end of this financial year, is that correct? At the end of this year?
I'm hoping so, because
so that will hopefully see a bit of an increase on the national minimum wage.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. I want to just touch on a few other issues, because we're sitting in a situation now where you've got unemployment rates sitting at almost 30%. And I mean, I've heard stories of the queues at the CCMA, and I don't know, perhaps you can confirm that, of how desperate people are at this point in terms of losing jobs, and they have been, let off because their companies can't afford to hold them. I mean, are you seeing major increases in this?
Yeah, this year alone we're seeing a lot of a high increase in large-scale retrenchment processes. Your Section 189A processes. I don't want to mention names, but there's been that large scale, but that is more related to the fourth industrial revolution. That is more based on the fact that companies, technologically so, are moving towards automation and digitization.
And that they don't have the skills, unfortunately, the workers that you're saying.
Yeah, and that for us is where, for my personal opinion, is where we have failed, because we knew that the fourth industrial revolution was coming, but not as a CCMA. I'm talking about employers now. They knew the fourth industrial revolution was coming. They knew that they were moving towards automation, digitization. The question is then, if that was the intended move, why then were employees not trained to be able to be abreast with the movements that the companies are currently making?
That's quite a sobering thought and a great perspective in terms of where we're at. We're speaking constantly about this fourth industrial revolution and preparing ourselves for it, but you at the CCMA are seeing this in action. People are queuing up, losing their jobs. Is it more now than you've seen in many years in terms of people being retrenched and coming to see you? The numbers, you could say that.
I can say that, yeah.
I want to ask you another question in terms of the xenophobic attacks as well.
Okay.
There's always this speculation out there and an idea out there, and perhaps you can talk to us about that the national minimum wage does not relate to foreigners, and that they can be paid much lower than South Africans, and therefore there is this animosity, and people then, of course, get angry. They get the foreign nationals get the jobs. The South African citizens won't get that because they obviously deserve the minimum wage, but the foreign people will not get that minimum wage. Can you talk to us about that?
I think that's an incorrect perspective. When the national minimum wage applies to all workers, it doesn't matter whether or not you are a foreign national or whether or not you are local. It's applicable to everyone. Like all other pieces of labor legislation, there's protection in as far as what is supposed to happen. And the issue with what is being said is we have the Immigrations Act that is there that says foreign nationals can be employed within the context of South African law. You've got the Labour Relations Act, which extends protection to foreign nationals, whether or not they have a valid permit or not, which says that if it expires or it doesn't expire, they still have the exact same rights as any other person who is currently a citizen of South Africa, in as far as those rights being protected in terms of the Labour Relations Act. So if you look at that from that perspective, and you look at the national minimum wage, it does not make a distinction to say if you are a foreign national, this piece of legislation is not applicable to you. It's applicable. It's just that you have, for lack of a better term, you have naughty employers who try and circumvent and take advantage, and it's just a situation of trying to monitor that.
All right. We have to leave it there. I know that there's been a lot that we've covered and so much more we still can cover, but nonetheless it's been good getting just a little bit of official word. And the frightening thing is the amount of people that are going to the CCMA after being retrenched or resigned in that fourth industrial revolution, besides everything else playing a very big part. South Africa clearly not ready for this. Mpumelelo Nconco, Acting Convening Senior Commissioner at the CCMA, talking to us about shop stewards union officials gathering for a 2-day meeting starting today to assess how the minimum wage has been implemented nationwide. We take a break. When we return to Zimbabwe, we go. Stay tuned.